Hello, my name's Carol Sherriff, and today I'm in conversation with Sonia Mayor. Now, I actually first met Sonia when she was one of my clients, and she was working for one of the leading UK agencies concerned with care for some of our most vulnerable children and young people. And Sonia very much played the role of internal facilitator. She's always been interested in collaboration and working together. So it's really no surprise that when Sonia left that organisation, she became a facilitator herself. I was therefore very intrigued to find out about her new work, which is around restorative conversations, particularly dealing with the race. And Sonia calls these building bridges, not walls. I was really interested when I found out you were doing restorative conversations, and specifically the idea of building bridges, not walls. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what you're doing as part of that?
Yeah, I think this has been just my work in leadership development and as a facilitator and working across health, education, social care and business now. It's really been looking at what are the key skills that helps leaders and there's skills around listening. And actually that applies across all the areas that we work in, and the quality of how we listen. And I think that's the beginning of a conversation, really thinking about how am I listening to this person, actually when they're talking, what's going on for me, and have I already made my mind up? And that also has been such a big thing in the Eastern tradition when we think about mindfulness and different cultures, how listening features so much in those traditional practices. And I know that you, Carrie, you have a mindfulness practice. Yeah, on Buddhism. So really thinking about those simple skills that we practice and how they really help at this time where there's a lot of debate going on and a lot of people have a lot of opinions, but how much do we slow down and listen to someone's perspective?
Can you take us through that a little bit more, Sonia? Because I suspect that quite a lot of the people, watching, listening, may well use mindfulness, but they'll think about it as stilling their own mind and, much more about stress relief than as a part of listening, which is really, really intriguing.
And I think particularly in this climate and this level of anxiety and uncertainty, it's when our mind and our thoughts are racing and we feel that in our bodies. And I think my practice has really changed in the last 5 years. I've been training as a body psychotherapist, and a part of that practice is body assisted mindfulness, and it really brings you into the present and really listening moment to moment about what's going on, not just for the other person, but as we're listening to somebody, what's happening in our own bodies, and that stillness and that presence helps us really take in what somebody else is saying. And it's not just the content of what they're talking about. We also get a sense of what those values are that person's speaking from, what those beliefs might be, and particularly in the context of diversity, and realizing actually we're in a room with people having very different opinions and beliefs coming through in the content of what they're talking about.
So knowing your work from the past, I absolutely know that you will be accepted for what you do. But part of me, and I think other people are probably thinking as well, so I know you work with, managers, quite senior managers in education all over the place. So how on earth do you get them to go here with you?
I think it's, we always talk about relationship-based practice, don't we? And it is all in the relationship. So there's something about prior to us meeting and establishing a relationship with folk, really listening to what's important to them. So if we're organising meetings, really getting a sense of what is it that they want, and what are some of the values coming through, and then designing based on those values, and really bringing in people from those different sectors coming together to thinking about actually what are some of the commonalities and where are the differences. So it's not minimizing those differences, it's actually really flushing them out and bringing them to the open, and setting up that safe space of setting up a space where we can have those differences and be really respectful as well, and that's going to cause tension, but how do we hold, as facilitators, how do we hold that tension?
So how do you, Sonia? $24 question.
I think that's so moment to moment, isn't it? And actually having that compassion of when we don't. So there is that sense of, I think how I hold it is by naming things in the moment, so rather than interpreting what's going on, just bringing awareness and naming and using my observation skills of, I notice this now, and bringing curiosity into the room. So, and that can really free up people, because sometimes when we're in the thick of it, we lose a sense of awareness of, oh, actually what's going on for me. So those, and doing something that's quite counter-cultural at the minute, which is really slowing down and actually saying to people, actually, we've got this time and we've got space here to think. Whereas, most people in the environments that we're working in, Carol, it's like people don't have any time to think things through. So actually really being sacred with our time, and helping people just think, yeah, this is space to think and slow it down.
Again, can you outline just sort of one of your sessions? How do you begin that thinking? Because I think that's really, really important to all manner of practices as well as your own.
It really starts in the development side, when people first approach me, and building that rapport, really feeling into and sensing what is it that people want from the work. And then also whilst we're in the session, contracting together, so what are the principles that we're going to work to here, and actually taking the time, so not just having a list of principles that we've designed before, the kind of standard ones, or we will listen to everyone and be respectful, but actually not doing that, actually getting people to think through what's important to them in a session, and particularly in Zoom, actually putting people in breakout rooms, and actually saying, what brings out the best in me? What brings out the worst in me? What's important for me here? And just by people having an opportunity to talk in that way, they're already getting a sense of the other person and what's important to them. And by actually us together designing those principles, already you've got a certain level of buy-in. And I think that eases stuff, because it breaks the ice. People are getting to, I know that some people have said to me, I've never been asked that, how many times have we gone into meetings where there's not a clear purpose, and you've not been part of designing the agenda, it feels very transactional, whereas actually starting from a very human level of, what's important to you, what brings out the best in you, what's made your heart sing. It's operating on a different level, and because people have actually asked us to come in is they're willing to actually look at working in this way, and maybe perhaps they don't in their day-to-day meetings.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you've spoken about, you know, finding that space and that trust and being mindful, but then some of the difficult issues come up. And I know one of your ways of working's topic, I mean, I don't want to call it a topic actually, but is around race and diversity and that kind of thing. So I'm wondering, you know, how do you open up that? What do you do there?
It really is. I think race and diversity, and particularly in this context, is a really interesting one because we're all from a race. And when I've been working with individuals and groups on this, is actually helping them self-reflect. So taking of actually, when did they first become aware that they were a particular race? When did they first become aware of difference? How was that treated in their families, and what did they learn? So I think that real self-reflective exercise is really important, and really helping groups think about actually who gets left off in that, you know. And I know some of the work that I've been doing around race and diversity, it's people often think about difference, but they don't think about the dominant group, you know, and actually what is it like to be white, and in our case British, you know, what kind of, in terms of race, what does that mean to you? So really everyone is in this conversation, and what have we learned about ourselves? So I think first point around diversity that I really start with is that self-reflection piece, because it does start with us. What have we learned? Because we can have an intellectual conversation and we can talk about systemic oppression, and all of that has a place, and you know, our history is important, absolutely important, but how does it live in present time, and how does it live in my body, and how does it live in the context that I'm in? Because again, it can feel so enormous to actually deal with this issue, but there's something around breaking it down into how does it live in me first.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, for many white people, white facilitators, at the moment, what it feels like is very uncomfortable. And, you know, and I was interested in you saying, when were you first aware of your race? And the answer to that for me is extraordinarily uncomfortable, because I've been aware of British for a long time, and am I English, all those kind of things. But am I white? You know, is that my race? Much more recently. So I can absolutely see how important that is, and listening. Where are you aiming to take people, or do you let it, you know, what's your approach there? I won't preempt, Sonia.
And again, I don't think I'm aiming to take people anywhere. I think when people have come to me, it's like, actually, we want to have more awareness about how this lives in our organisation. And so it is really designing and contracting with those organisations about how far do you want to go with this, and what's your intention, and what's your purpose, and what are the risks of opening this up. And so really helping the organisations I'm working with be very boundaried about this is what it is and this is what it isn't, because particularly when we're working with diversity, and you know, in all the years I've worked, the kind of real mantra is actually we've told you our needs, we've done this, you know it, but nothing changes. So there's something around actually how do we engage in a different kind of conversation, and I really like the principles of restorative practice and restoration, because they really are at the heart of them. It is about listening, it's about acknowledgement, it's about acknowledging our history, and the history that we don't really talk about. So I was so interested, you know, when you said about actually what it's for me to think about being white and how uncomfortable that is. And that's an interesting conversation to be having in a group. It's let's talk about the uncomfortableness,
Yeah.
you know, and because I've heard that from Black communities that I've worked with around othering and how uncomfortable that is. But to actually hear some white facilitators talk about, oh, actually, I'm really uncomfortable talking about my own race and my identity, that's new.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's some of the latest really interesting books that have really evoked that, as well as Black Lives Matters, in terms of really starting to bring this to the surface again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't want my race to dominate this, but it's so interesting, this sort of books and take on white fragility, because I don't think as a white person I have felt fragile before. And yet, as you say, as we open up, it does make you very fragile. But as I say, I don't want this to be dominated by me, Sonia. So what can we go a little bit broader in terms of facilitation as well? I know you do these restorative conversations. I was wondering, and maybe you don't separate it like this, but do you take some of these practices when you're doing what we might call more conventional facilitation? You know, how does that work?
Yeah, I think they're all the kind of practices that I use them in whatever role I'm working in, and whatever sector. And I think, you know, if I really break it down in terms of thinking actually what are the restorative practices and principles, it is around building trust. It is around real quality listening, creating a safe space, surfacing differences and commonalities, and being committed to, okay, what are we going to commit to, and what actions are we going to take? And I think it's all of those simple practices, you know, and actually having really flushing out our assumptions, looking at you know, when we think about critical thinking and how do we critique ourselves and hold ourselves in that place? How do we really work with our contradictions individually and collectively? And I think it's, you know, to be able to do that individually, to be able to do that in groups, and to be able to do that globally would be just the kind of things that are really needed at this time. Is how do we hold contradiction?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much, Sonia. So I can tell you that that won't be the end of my conversation with Sonia, but I invite you to also join us. I'm sure you're intrigued, maybe puzzled. Maybe you do similar things, but in a different way. We'd really like to hear more. So please feel free to join this conversation so you can share your views on the Wilson Sherriff webpage, Facilitating Diversity. You can also comment on our dedicated YouTube channel. And of course, you can engage with the social media conversation. So please do tell us what you think. Do engage with other people during International Facilitation Week. And I really hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Goodbye for now.